Noah Gragson will return to Junior Motorsports in 2022. Michael McDowell has begun talks of Farmer Motorsports for the 2022 season, and the next-gen car will be tested at Daytona next week. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight in those really quickly. We're going to start off with Nick Sanchez and Roger Cruz, as they will both be running full-time for Rev Racing in the ARCA Series in 2022 season. And it already announced that Roger Cruz was going to be running full-time before going full-time with Tommy Joe Barnes' new team, Alpha Prime Racing, for 2023. And now we have confirmation he'll be there full-time with Rev Racing in 2022. Talking about both of these drivers, first of all, really excited to see Roger Cruz coming back. Roger Cruz, I've been really impressive in his late model stuff. Again, his ARCA stuff hasn't been too impressive, but I do think, especially at a young age, I think he's got a lot of time to develop and a lot of time to grow. And I think that Rev Racing is going to be there to really help him along the way. So I think that Roger Cruz will be somewhat of a contender next year, especially if Ty Gibbs moving up. He could be a surprise championship threat, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. In regards to Nick Sanchez has been pretty quietly having a good year in ARCA this year. He currently sits third in the points behind Corey Heim and Ty Gibbs currently moment in the championship. And Nick Sanchez has had some pretty strong runs so far with Rev Racing. I would not be surprised if Nick Sanchez is able to score the victory in at least one of the events next year in ARCA, especially, like I said, since Ty Gibbs is probably moving up to Xfinity full-time next year. I would expect that Nick Sanchez will probably get a win or two next year for Rev Racing. I think that Roger Cruz will have a good run. It was also announced at the time that they are not going to be running their ARCA East Championship next year and be focused mainly on ARCA, which I think is the right step in the right direction. You never know. Rev Racing at some point could move up to Trucks or Xfinity or another organization long term. But it's really cool to see that Rev Racing has two drivers full-time for next year. It's great to see that they're going to be competing full-time in ARCA in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Carson Ware. As Carson Ware is going to be driving the 74 for My Karma Racing this weekend at Darlington International Raceway. I'll be honest, I'm not expecting Carson Ware to do much. We've seen the 74 car run at points in the top 20, top 25, and Carson Ware's had a couple decent runs this year, and he's gotten out of the way of points as well, and he's been a lap-down car, but I'm really not expecting Carson Ware to do much this weekend. I think he's going to struggle overall in the race, but it's good experience for overall. I wouldn't be surprised long-term if he does go full-time with Rick Ware's SS Greenlight organization down the road. I'm wishing the best luck to Carson Ware, though, and hopefully he will have a very strong run, and hopefully he'll have a good run, maybe get a top 20 or top 25, but I'm not expecting much from Carson Ware, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Massey. As Massey is going to drive the 17 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Darlington Raceway. Massey's had a couple decent runs so far with the BJ McLeod organization. I believe this is his first start outside of racing for the BJ McLeod Motorsports organization. Now, like I said, I'm not expecting him to run absolutely great. Even though we've seen the 17 car run in the top 15 and top 20 with drivers like JJ Yeley who have driven this car in the past, I'm not expecting Massey really crack top 20 this weekend, especially with the field being a little more competitive this weekend than past weekends. I don't think he's going to crack top 20. I think top 25 definitely should be the goal for this SS Greenlight number 17 organization and this Rick Ware team as well. But like I said, we've seen some good runs, especially from some certain drivers who've run well in the team. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets top 25, but I think the goal should be a top 25 for him this weekend. Good luck to Massey this weekend here at Darlington. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Tyler Reddick. As Tyler Reddick is going to be once again driving the number 23 for Our Motorsports this weekend at Darlington Raceway. Tyler Reddick has competed in quite a few Xfinity Series races this year so far. Tyler Reddick is also going to be getting a little more experience for the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs later this weekend at Darlington. Remember, Cup Series drivers that have less than 3 years experience and don't run 5 more races are allowed to run these races even if they are in the playoffs before the playoffs begin. Now, no Cup drivers will be allowed to run races after the playoffs start, which are in a couple weeks for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. In regards to Tyler Reddick competing, I think Tyler Reddick has a very good shot of contending overall for the victory. Tyler Reddick is historically really good at Darlington. He's won there a couple times, I think, in Xfinity. And he's been historically really fast at that track. So keep an eye on Tyler Reddick. I think he's going to have a lot of speed. And I would not be surprised to see him at least contend for top 5 or top 10. But I think he'd be an underdog to win. We've seen his car run up front quite a few times. And I would not be surprised to see Tyler Reddick run really well this weekend here at Darlington Xfinity to get a little more experience with Cup. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Austin Dillon. As Austin Dillon is going to be driving a 31 for Jordan Anderson Racing this weekend here at Darlington International Raceway. I think Austin Dillon has a very strong shot of competing up front in this event. We've seen this 31 car run really well with a lot of different drivers that have been in this car. I believe he's the 5th or 6th Cup driver that has ran this car. Josh Berry's ran this car. He's run really well. Eric Jones was running really well with the CM4G crash late at Watkins Glen, was running in the top 10 in that event. Tyler Reddick has ran in the top 10 quite a few events. So I think minimal. I think a guy, like I said, who's won the Xfinity Series championship, I think that he'll have a very strong shot of contending at least for a top 10. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets top 5 this weekend with his Cup Series experience. I think he'll run really, really well. Don't be surprised if Austin Dillon runs well. I think this is also Austin Dillon's first, like a second or third start of the year so far, so he hasn't ran that much in Xfinity this year so far. But I think Austin, especially a little bit of experience, he'll try to run really well this weekend here at Darlington. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we were talking about Denny Hamlin. As Denny Hamlin is going to be driving the 54 for Joe Gibbs Racing this weekend at Darlington International Raceway. This is his one-off start. Denny Hamlin tends to run this race in NASCAR Xfinity Series to get a little more experience for the Cup Series at Darlington. He tends to run a one-off. I believe Sports Cups will also be sponsoring this weekend as well. Unless Denny Hamlin fails to qualify, I think he's going to win the race. Denny Hamlin's really good at Darlington historically. Last year, he was on the verge of winning the race before issues happened late between him and Ross Chastain in a really, really classic battle. I would expect that Denny Hamlin will be a contender in that event. I think he has a very strong shot of competing overall for the victory. Don't be surprised if he gets it done. Good luck to Denny Hamlin this weekend, and I think Denny Hamlin has a very strong shot of competing for the win overall. And I think he will win because the 54 car has been the best every single weekend. Don't be surprised if Denny Hamlin picks up the victory in that 54 car this weekend here at Darlington International Raceway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about TV ratings from this past weekend at Daytona International Speedway. According to Adam Stern, NBC earned a 2.25 rating and 3.928 million viewers for the Coke Zero Sugar 400. It is off slightly from 2020 in ratings, which had a 2.41 rating, but it was up slightly in viewership, 3.9 million viewers. He also reported that the race had the second best viewership of sports last weekend, behind one NFL game, but ahead of the PGA Tour event. Honestly, the fact that the ratings were a little bit up this year in a lot of departments is really, really good this year, considering that there were quite a few areas, key areas for NASCAR. You look at the Tampa area where they were not able to watch. You look at Daytona area where they were not able to watch because of preseason game. And a couple of marquee areas, I think Washington also was not allowed to watch. So you had a couple preseason games going on, which did affect the ratings a little bit. If not for the fact he had a couple of those preseason games going on, which for whatever reason those affiliates basically decided to affect it, I feel like we could have had a lot better ratings in regards to NBC getting better ratings than what they got this past year. I think wouldn't have been surprised if we got like 4 or even 4.5 million viewers in the event. Again, 3.9 million viewers. I expected the race probably have 3 to 4 million viewers, so we almost got 4 million, which is not too bad for this race. We were up a little bit this year in viewership. It's good to see that at least we were up in the viewership. It does take a little bit down in ratings, but you kind of have to blame, unfortunately, NASCAR. Well, you got to blame the TV networks for kind of screwing NASCAR out of that. But overall, the ratings are not too bad for the Coke Zero Sugar 400. Hopefully, the ratings go up long term, and we'll see better ratings down the road for NASCAR. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. Jimmie Johnson tested his IndyCar. Remember, there was a test that was happening at Texas Motor Speedway this week. He tested yesterday, and this is what he had to say about testing an IndyCar at Texas Motor Speedway. He says, "I'm definitely a step closer. I need maybe at least another test session, but driving the car yesterday only piqued my interest for more." Jimmie Johnson is trying to test an IndyCar because he has been more interested in running the Indianapolis 500. And the more experience he gets the IndyCars on ovals, the better I think he's going to be. I honestly think that if Jimmie Johnson is approved to run and he does well enough in these tests, I think he will run the Indy 500 with Chip Ganassi Racing, and I do think that Jimmie Johnson actually will be very competitive. It seems like I think Jimmie Johnson, I'm a little surprised that Jimmie Johnson has not run as many ovals and is tempted to run the road course. I think Jimmie Johnson on the ovals, I think he will be a lot more competitive than he would be on the road courses. I really think he would. Again, Jimmie Johnson's IndyCar season so far has not been really that impressive to watch. I will say he has gotten better as season has gone on, but he hasn't finished really that many races inside the top 20 this year. He's only had 1 or 2 top 20 finishes throughout the year. He'll be running at Portland I think in a week or two. I think Jimmie Johnson will have some speed in that event. The more experience he has gotten, the more time he's gotten in practice, the better that he has become. So I really hope Jimmie Johnson is able to compete in the 500 next year. I think he's most likely going to run and join the illustrious class. You're going to have Romain Grosjean running that event. He's going to be running full-time with that team next year. And he's going to have a lot of drivers, even maybe Kyle Larson, who could run the Indy 500 as well. So I think Jimmie Johnson will run the Indy 500, and I think if his tests continue to go really, really well, and again, the good news is he's enjoying the test. He's enjoyed it, and also he shaved, by the way, but I'm really cool to see that Jimmie Johnson got the test yesterday in IndyCar at ovals. He had Scott Dixon, Dario Franchitti, and Tony Kanaan over there as well. Guys that have either worked at Chip Ganassi in the past or are currently racing at Chip Ganassi, working him to get tested and acclimated to the cars. hopefully we'll see Jimmy Johnson really soon going to IndyCar and racing really soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the next-gen test that is coming up at Daytona International Speedway. It was first reported that Kelly Crandall that 8 NASCAR Cup Series teams will test the next-gen car on September 7th, September 8th, which is going to be next Monday and a week from today and a week from tomorrow. The people that will be testing this car are going to be Austin Hill, who drives for RCR, Danny Hamlin for Joe Gibbs Racing, Chris Buescher for Roush Fenway Racing, Joey Logano for Team Penske, William Byron for Hendrick Motorsports, Cole Custer for Stewart Haas Racing, Ross Chastain for Chip Ganassi, which will eventually be Trackhouse, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for JT Doherty Racing. This test, I think, is very, very important because this is going to be the first time that we're going to have not only 1 or 2 cars out on the track, but we are going to have 8 cars at once out on the racetrack. And what I think we're going to be able to see is how this car races. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to see how the draft works. Again, it's a tire test, and the cars are going to be slower at the track than they are on a normal speeds. In my opinion, if you want the truth, I do think that preseason testing going into next year is a thing that needs to come back, at least for 2021. Because we do have a new car. I think preseason testing for Super Speedways at Daytona needs to come back. We might, however, though, at least with this test, we might be able to gauge what we're going to be able to see for Super Speedway races. Again, Super Speedway racing after this year is going to be a lot different. Remember, they switched the package for the upcoming race Talladega this past weekend at Daytona. This test, I think, is going to be able to give it a little bit, and we're going to be able to gauge a little bit how this next-gen car is going to roll out just a little bit. Again, I've said this many, many times on the channel, but I'm going to say this again. This next-gen car has to be really, really good. It doesn't have to be absolutely picture perfect, because I do think there's going to be issues that I think expect to be absolutely great. It is fantastic, but I want to see at least a little bit of good racing throughout the 2022 season going into next year. I don't, like I said, I kind of expected a car to be perfect. I don't expect the car to be perfect. I think that the car is going to have issues and kinks at the beginning, and teams are going to be able to adjust and find out. But I do think that eventually this car will have to eventually be really, really good and good product on the racetrack. I think it'll be good on road courses, but I think on other test tracks, we'll have to wait and see it. That's why they're reconfiguring Atlanta, because they're not expecting racing to be absolutely great. They're probably going to spread out eventually, though. But it's good to see they're doing the next-gen test on multiple cars. I've been wanting them to have multiple cars tested once. It is a Goodyear tire test, but we'll be able to gauge next week on how the racing is, at least on the super speedway tracks. And hopefully, as time goes on, all these teams. Again, there are a few teams that are not testing next-gen car. If you notice, 2311 Racing is not going to be there. Trackhouse technically going to be there because Ross Chastain is technically testing with Chip Ganassi, which is going to be Trackhouse. You also don't have Starcom Racing there, Rickware Racing, or a couple other organizations, because apparently those teams have still not gotten all their parts and pieces. I think eventually all those teams are going to be able to get all the parts and pieces they're going to need for the next-gen car. So it's really good to see that there's going to be a next-gen test coming up at Daytona really, really soon. I'm looking forward to that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Noah Gragson. As Noah Gragson is going to be returning to Junior Motorsports full-time in 2022, driving the 9 car, which Bass Pro Shops, Black Rifle Coffee, and True Timber as sponsors that are going to be working with him in 2022. Does not 100% surprise me that Noah Gragson is going to be returning to Junior Motorsports. This year, I'm not going to lie, Noah Gragson has been struggling. Noah Gragson has not won a race this year. He currently sits 9th or 10th for the points. I do think over the last 5 or 6 weeks, he has been improving gradually. His finishes have been improving. His average finish last year was like an 8.1. This year's average finish is like a 14th or 15th place average finish. He's had a lot of DNFs so far this year. But as season has progressed, I think his footing has gotten a lot better, and I think he has become overall a much better driver. But this confirms a couple of things. One, we got Noah Gragson going back to the 9. That because we now know the Sam Ayer is going to be a team full-time next year, probably with another car, maybe the 1 or 88. We know that Justin Allgaier is going to be returning to 7. Justin Allgaier is part of that team because Kelly Earnhardt is part of the board of directors for Brandt. You got Josh Reed is going to be driving 8. The big question right now is what's going to happen with the other parts of the organization. What happens to the other drivers on the team? With Sam Mayer going to be confirmed full-time, does his team go to a 5-car organization next year, or does his team go to a 4-car organization next year? Because Dale Jr. has said that he would like to run 5 full-time cars, and he said we could run 5 full-time cars here. I think the thing is, I think it all is going to be depending on what happens to Michael Annett, because Michael Annett has had a really bad leg injury, and he's been bruised and beaten up from that leg injury, that leg surgery that he had not too long ago. And he says he's still feeling a lot of those pains and that tension when he goes into the corners, even at tracks like Daytona. He still was able to race yesterday, was able to continue on for a long portion of the race, was able to finish the race, but he's currently sitting out of the NASCAR Plus. And you have to look at Michael Annett, he is a lot older of a driver. But I think the one thing that Michael Annett does have going for him going into 2022, if he is a return team, is he does have that pilot Flying J sponsorship that he's had for a long time, even his time driving for, I can't remember exactly the team's name, in Cup, A-Scout Motorsports. When he drove for them, he had Pilot Flying J sponsoring him over there. So that could be the thing that keeps him there, but I think his future is going to determine on if he's able to 100% recover or not. But if he is returned full-time, I think this is how the lineup is going to go. I think Michael Annett will drive the 1. I think that in the 8 car will go to Sam Mayer. The 9 car is going, actually the 8 car will be driven by Josh Berry. The 9 will be driven by Noah Gragson. The 7, Justin Allgaier. And then I think that they will bring back the 88 car, and that's where Sam Mayer is going to go next year. But if Michael Annett decides to retire at the end of this year and doesn't continue racing, I think that this means that Sam Mayer goes over to 1, but Michael Annett, I think, has a good shot at coming back. I think that, though, going back to Noah Gragson, Noah Gragson, I think, is going to improve as a driver. He brings funding and sponsorship. He's got a really good personality inside of NASCAR, and he brings a lot to the table. Now, what are my expectations for Noah Gragson next year? 1, he's got to improve on this year. He's got to get his average back to where he was in 2020, improve on that, and be a lot bigger contender. The next thing is Noah Gragson is going to have to start winning races. He's going to have to start winning more consistently because there's a couple of really good drivers that are going up the Cup next year. You're not going to have Justin Hill you're going to be competing against full-time next year. You're not going to have Austin Center going to be competing full-time next year. Of course, you can have a couple guys like Ty Gibbs who's going to be going full-time at Xfinity next year. But I think that if you are, in my opinion, if you are Noah Gragson, you need to win races and at least a couple next year. You need to win you need to win more than you did in 2020. I like to see Noah Gragson really take it to the next level, start showing what he's capable of. Because I think Noah Gragson has talent, has great personality, but you can't really back it up when you only have 2 wins currently in your NASCAR Xfinity Series career. So in my honest and sincere opinion, Noah Gragson next year is going to have to step it up to the plate and start winning more races. I like Noah a lot. He's got a good personality, but I need to see a little bit more from Noah Gragson going into 2022 in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Michael McDowell. Today was the beginning of the postseason media day for the Cup Series, and Michael McDowell was talking about his future. I believe it's Kelly Crandall who asked about his future, and he says that he's in discussions with Front Row Motorsports about 2022, and he does have the opportunity to run full-time again. That's my plan. But he also acknowledges it's still early for the company to finalize things. If you know the history of Front Row Motorsports, Front Row tends to not finalize things until all the way up till December. Remember, in December, it was announced that Anthony Alfredo would really not start racing. They didn't officially finalize their plans for Front Row till January. I think it was early January, January 6th or 20, January 5th. They decided to finalize their plans for that organization. So they waited that long to announce their drivers for the 2020 season. I think Michael McDowell had already been announced, but it was already announced that John Hunter was going to be leaving the team and Anthony Alfredo had taken over the team. So it's going to be a long time before this does get finalized. But if you want my honest and sincere opinion about Michael McDowell, I think Michael McDowell does deserve to return full-time Cup Series racing this year. Michael McDowell has 1 win this year in the Daytona 500, and he's been somewhat competitive throughout this year. I believe he still currently sits in the top 20 in the regular season standings, so he's been consistently really good. And I think this 34 team has taken major steps forward. I think he's fallen off a little bit as we've gotten farther down into the season, but I think Michael McDowell has proven that he's been capable to get it done in the Cup Series. And the longer he's been in the series, and even look back to last year, he was starting to show what he's going to be capable of. The big question right now is the big rumors. There are rumors going on at the moment right now that there is potential that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports could merge in some way. Potential is that Front Row Motorsports could sell one of their charters or sell both of their charters eventually over to 2311 Racing, or sell one of their charters to 2311 Racing and sell one of their charters over to Front Row Motorsports. I personally think this is what's going to happen. I think that Front Row Motorsports is going to sell one of their charters to 2311. I think it's going to be the 38 charter, and I personally think that Michael McDowell is going to end up returning to the 34 car full-time next season. I think Michael McDowell deserves to go back full-time next year, and I think he'll bring a lot to the plate. That's another big thing, too, is what happens to Anthony Alfredo in the 38 team going into next year. I think Anthony Alfredo is more than likely going to be out of Front Row Motorsports. Anthony Alfredo this year in Cup, he hasn't been too impressive. If you want my honest opinion, I really like Anthony Alfredo a lot. I think he's a really, really good and talented driver. But the problem with Anthony Alfredo is I think he got rushed up way too quickly to moving up to the Cup Series this year. I think he should have had a little more experience in Xfinity. I think 1 for a full-time year at Richard Childress Racing this year in Xfinity would have made a huge difference in a performance for Anthony Alfredo. And I think Anthony Alfredo performed a lot better than Maya Sider has this year. Yes, Maya Sider does have a win so far in Xfinity at Homestead Miami Speedway. But other than that, Maya Sider, that's the only top 5 he's had. And he's only had 2 or 3 other top 10 finishes throughout the year so far. And he's below Riley Herbst in the points, which is not really that impressive, to be honest with you. So, in my opinion, I think Anthony Alfredo should go back to Xfinity and run full-time there. I think it makes a lot more sense to him. And he's young enough. Remember, he's only 21 or 22 years of age. So he's young enough where he can pull the John Hunter Nemechek route and come back much stronger. If this does happen, if Front Row does sell the charters to either GMS or 2311, they sell it, what happens to Michael McDowell then? I think Michael McDowell has a couple options. Maybe he goes over to 2311 Racing and drives for that organization. But again, he and Bubba Wallace, Michael McDowell, Bubba Wallace have had a history in the past. Remember, look back at Bristol last year at the All-Star race. Michael McDowell dumped Bubba Wallace. They were not very happy with each other, and Bubba was really pissed at Michael McDowell after that. I think they had history already this year, so I don't think they'd be able to work together very, very well. Or maybe he goes to Rickard Racing if that opens up. Rickard Racing is talking about maybe only going to 1 or 2 competitive cars, and maybe that is an option for Michael McDowell going into next year. But like I said, if you want my honest and sincere opinion, I think most likely Michael McDowell is going to return to Front Row Motorsports next year. I don't see him getting rid of Michael McDowell, like I said. I think he's been absolutely incredible to watch so far in the 2021 season and much better than I thought he was going to be. I don't think anybody predicted he was going to make the playoffs here and be as competitive as he's been. I think he's been one of the most improved drivers so far of the 2021 season. I think most likely Michael McDowell is going to return to team next year, but we'll have to wait and see what happens to Michael McDowell going into the 2022 season. And I think also you have to look at Michael McDowell too. Michael McDowell is a really, really awesome road course racer, and Michael McDowell, like I said, has been really good at road courses throughout this year and even in the past years. And this car is going to be more like this next gen car is going to be more like a road course car, a Trans Am car. Michael McDowell has a lot of experience from Champ Car stuff and other racing series and open wheel. He's got a little bit of experience on that, and he's also competed in the Rolex and all that other types of racing as well. So I think Michael McDowell would definitely fit in the cards to go back to this team next year. I would like to see him go back full-time, but if not, he could go to another organization next year. But I think that Michael McDowell is more than likely going to return to Front Row Motorsports in the 2022 season. So, anyway, that is it for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Link schedule below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think that Noah Gragson is going to improve next year in 2022, or do you think he's going to be kind of similar to what he did this year? Let me know in the comments below. And do you think Michael McDowell is going to return to Front Row in 2022, or do you think he's going to be going to another team? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content like this on the channel. Take care, everybody.